Hello, Jessica Kastner. Thank you so much for being on the Positively Joy podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, Yvette. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So I'm just meeting all these wonderful women in this space where we're talking about divorce and kind of post-divorce and healing and redemption. And I found you. I'm so happy that I found you. You are the co-host of a new podcast called Free Failing. Love that name. And also you're the author of Hiding from the Kids in My Prayer Closet, which sounds like a great book. I love that title.
Yeah, it's for real. It's for real. And now they're teens, so they're everywhere now. So I'm like hiding in the garage in the car. If that was my sequel, you
Understand.
know.
Yeah. So let's talk about the podcast because it's new. Tell us when it started and why did you start it?
So I'm co-host of a podcast with my friend Jess and I. So we're both Jesses. She's also a divorced mom. And what's great about our friendship, I love God's timing because we had been friends for decades. She was a married homeschooling stay-at-home mom. She got a divorce 5 years ago. I recently was divorced. So we find ourselves in completely different lives than we had met, where we were married Christian wives with kids. And we often, like for the past couple of years, would be out kind of venting and just going through like our day and our week. And we're like, we should make a podcast because this is like, it's so cathartic to talk about all of the things that life after divorce entails. And there's not a lot out there in the Christian space. So I'm glad that you do what you do, but there's not a ton in books and
Yeah, no,
sermons and, you know.
I agree with you. So when I got divorced, which was in 2003, long time ago, I really didn't see any kind of divorce support groups. Now I am aware of Divorce Care, which is something that's at my church, and I'm actually a co-host of that, a co-leader, I should say, of that. But no, when I got divorced, I didn't. There was nothing that I knew. I didn't know who to talk to, except for God, and that's part of my testimony. But let's talk a little bit about yours, and let's talk about basically you came to the realization or God gave it to you. Oh, and before that, let me just say thank you for acknowledging that there's not a lot in this space. There's a lot about divorce, like divorce
There
in
is.
general. There's a ton of podcasts and blogs and stuff. But when I'm looking for ways to help me understand how I am going to just kind of reconcile this whole thing with my faith, that
Mhm.
is where I felt like I needed to be in that space. And obviously you are too. So thanks for acknowledging that.
You're welcome. And you got divorced pre Lisa Turkhurst. I feel like Lisa Turkhurst at least helped. I'm like, okay, no one's happy she got a divorce, but she gave a voice, right? So as she's a woman of faith, celebrated. I follow her. So it's like you were even before her. I feel like she helped us all out by
Yeah.
being so open. I appreciate people that are open. But yeah, I feel like we'll get into it.
Yeah.
There's a whole stigma.
Definitely. Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, okay. Well, let's talk about you. Let's talk about, basically how you came to be here in this space and why you felt like it was important that you needed to be here.
So I feel like in the Christian world, so I started writing in the Christian space probably about 10 years ago, and my first book was published in 2017. And what led me to always just want to write and put my voice out there, I also have a blog, is I feel like there's not a lot of freedom to talk about the gritty stuff of life in Christian circles. So
Mm-hmm.
even the websites and even the places that you normally go, like there's some more like, oh, they say the word crap, or like, oh, they're real. They feel like you're actually your friend, but they're not out there. So I always found myself for years saying, I wish we could talk like this, like in a women's group at church, but you'd be afraid of being judged or you'd be labeled as like, oh, she's like a carnal Christian, like she drinks wine. Like I feel like there's still this lack of freedom to just be real with one another. And the
Yeah.
reason we call our podcast Free Failing is there's freedom in confession. Well, it's biblical. In confessing your sins, there's freedom. It's not to celebrate all the horrible things that you're going through. It's just like if you don't talk about it, the enemy will make it a secret and it'll become bondage. So I just feel like that's one of my goals in life is just to be real and live my life openly and give a mouthpiece to God's faithfulness and goodness even when life is really hard and kind of looks like a dumpster fire sometimes. And I just don't think there's enough of that, like realness, you know? So that's
Yes.
my thing.
That realness, that authenticity for sure, for sure. And after So whether you're separated or you've had a divorce, when you're going through all the things, a lot of times we are blaming ourselves because we don't know what else to do. We don't know, who else to
Yeah.
blame, but we just don't know how to handle it. And so there's so many things that I know we could talk about today, but I'm particularly interested in overcoming shame and guilt commonly associated with a failed marriage. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I have actually been divorced twice. So anything that, so like times two, right? 2.0 of the guilt and shame. The first time I feel like I had peace from God, where it was a really toxic marriage. He wasn't a believer. The second time wasn't my choice. So I can identify with all the different ways people come to the point of divorce. And I don't
Mhm.
think it's ever linear. I think it's such a complex decision. So I feel like the second time around, which was most recently, I was like, I don't even think, like, what are people going to say? Like, I don't think I could do this. Like, it was so, and I have children. So it's like to put your children through two divorces. What kind of mother does that? So for a while, I was like, divorce is not an option, even though it was really bad. I was just going to endure whatever I was enduring to avoid the guilt and shame. And I just felt the Lord kind of taking me by the hand, like literally, like I would take walks with Jesus in nature every single day, going through the second divorce, and just tell me basically that marriage isn't my identity. It doesn't mean you're any less or more close to the Lord when you're married.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that you don't have a ability to help people and to disciple people, and your giftings are any less anointed if you're divorced or married. So that's a big theme with me, because I feel like I have a lot of freedom. I actually don't have guilt and shame. I have guilt and shame that I'm working through for regret of motherhood kind of things. But when it
Mhm.
comes to divorce, I feel like God's been so gracious and wonderful. We're really freeing me of that. Like I feel like I have the full ability. I feel like I will get married again. I don't think I'm any less deserving. I feel like life is hard, and we all come here with all different kinds of trauma and all different kinds of backgrounds. And when marriage is tough, but that I'm never giving up. I feel like God can redeem any story. And I think there might be some people that might disagree with that. I've heard it all in Christian circles of doctrines about divorce, but I just feel like God is so good, and it's not going to keep me down.
So true. And, you talked about the fact that you're deserving. I was a serial dater after my divorce, and the Lord told me that, you need to stop that. You need to spend some time with me. I love this idea that you have of how divorce brings a special intimacy with the Lord if you allow it. And so looking over my shoulder, you can see my book Whispering in His Ear. And I do write about that surrender, that obedience that can create such a special and intimate relationship with God. And I know I needed that after my divorce. I was looking for another man, just somebody to fill, the spot that was empty. And what I learned, I needed the Lord to fill me. And so I love this idea of allowing the special intimacy with the Lord. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that?
Well, I am with you. So after my first divorce, it was the first night I was on my own. I had signed up for Christian Mingle, like the first night. Told all my friends, "Oh, just gonna." I couldn't even make it, but I wasn't really aware of what I was doing. I've gone to therapy since. Like that first divorce was 11 years ago, so I feel
Mhm.
like I'm a different person. God's walked me through and out of a lot of difficult seasons, but same thing. I feel like I was insecure and I didn't know it. So I go way into attachment theory. I'm like an attachment theory junkie now, because I've been finally found a good therapist. I'm like, okay, I wasn't securely attached. I didn't let God fill that place in my life where I could still feel secure by myself. And
Yeah.
honestly, if I'm honest, God just wasn't enough. I never knew that feeling. So I feel like with all the other areas of my life, I'd experienced such abundance and blessing, like finances, career, even parenting, because I was really surrendered. I felt like God was the king of my heart in those categories. But my romantic life never was. I just felt like I just always had a fear of being alone. So what's amazing is after this divorce, it's been 6 months now. It has not been fun, but it has been so healing because I have managed to just be alone and just, especially in the winter. I live in Connecticut. It was just literally, I felt like it was a hibernation season. Like I have a wood burning stove, and it was just me crying in the morning with my Bible, like just sobbing every morning. And I
Mhm.
just feel like this is where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to feel the feelings. We aren't taught to feel the sadness. I didn't know how to really like give my sadness to God, invite God into my loneliness. So I started praying even so differently. Like, God, I'm so sad. Like, I'm so stressed. Like, just let me, like, really like talking to him like a friend. And I
Yeah.
never did that in that area of my life. And it has been amazing. And I'm not perfect. Like, I feel like there's some nights you're just like, all right, like you're, thinking about the ex-boyfriend or just like, it's a
Mhm.
journey, but I feel like I'm living a miracle.
I love that. And I don't know about you. I went to church my whole life, but I never was a Bible reader. And I found that after my divorce, well, and not even so much after the divorce, because I'll say my divorce, the marriage was dead for a long time. So that divorce actually was just a wake, maybe, or, like a funeral or something. But it was the next couple of relationships where it was a broken relationship, where he broke up with me. That almost felt like the divorce. I was so sad, so incredibly sad. So, at that time, I I needed something, and I started reading the Bible in a way that I'd never done before. And so I find that getting into his way, you just mentioned crying, reading the Bible in the morning. I found that to be very helpful for me, because even though I went to church every Sunday, I was
Me too.
not one to spend time in the Word. And that, I think, is can be very cleansing and cathartic as well.
Okay, so I am a Bible girl. I've had the joy of working from home for years. So I can never be like, I almost don't want to brag about it, but like pretty much every morning I would read the Bible, but I'm like in my jammies when everyone's going to work.
Mhm.
So, but through this most recent divorce, I have fallen in love with the Psalms and discovered the Psalms in such a way I will not leave it. It's almost like I don't know if I can ever get out of it. Like every morning, at least four, and mostly it's just amazing. There's so much about being secure in the Lord. There's so much about nighttime. Like I feel like anxiety, especially for women, if you're living alone, I feel like bedtime is hard for me. There's so
Yes.
much in the Psalms. God will hem you in. God is always watching you when you're sleeping. I
Mhm.
wake up at night. He wakes up in the middle of the night. God with praise on your tongue. So much. And the third thing is God as your refuge. It's just about your refuge. And I feel like I turn that into not a place, a verb. So I've
Mhm.
learned through it's just like running to God and literally like just envisioning him hovering over me when you have that anxious feeling, when you're like, just that post divorce year, right? It's such a joy. So I feel like I'm in it, but I feel like God is my refuge in such a different way than I've ever experienced before. So I'm like a Psalms junkie. Like, I
Well,
don't think I can leave.
and while we are talking about Psalms, let's talk about prayer, because I was raised Catholic. So I went to church, people talked at me, and then I left, right? And I love it. I mean, I love there's elements of that experience. I still go on the high holy days. It's like Christmas is not Christmas for me if I don't go like to a Catholic service.
Hmm.
However, I go to a non-denominational service, with my husband now, which is more worship focused, and I love that. But at the time, I didn't know, I wasn't reading the Bible. I didn't really know how to pray. So I just want to take a moment for anyone out there listening. I discovered praying through scripture. Like if you don't know how to pray,
Yeah.
just pray the Psalms. I mean, since we're talking about Psalms, it is such an amazing way, because some people feel like they just don't know what to say. They don't know how to pray. I felt like unworthy to even say the
Mm.
words to God. So praying the Psalms can be, I think, a very helpful way if you just you want to get something out, but you don't know how. And since we're talking about it, I just want to share that as kind of a tip for people out there.
So when you pray the Psalms, because my sister was just talking, she's like, you have to pray the word. She was talking to someone else. Do you mean you personalize it, like Lord, you are, and just replace like the words and say it out loud as if like that reflective?
You can, but even if you don't even know that to do,
Okay,
just pray.
awesome.
Just yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yes, I will say this, and you can't see it now, but a neighbor gave me this most beautiful gift. It is, and it wasn't just all Psalms, it was all kind of different scripture, but it's a little jar with scriptures that have placed my name in it,
Oh, I
as
love stuff like
as
that.
I know, as the noun, as the subject, right? And it's like the subject or the direct object. Well, just depending on what the thing is.
Yes.
And like the Lord loves you, Yvette, blah blah, or whatever it says, right? And certainly there's some Psalms in there. So I would say if you feel, some people just need to build up to it. I just
Mm.
say just read the Psalms. But at some point, I think you will feel the boldness rise up in you, and then you will begin to personalize it, change that. And then there'll be a time when you don't have to do it and you do just feel confident talking to God, or as I say, whispering in his ear. I mean, you will feel that confidence, but in the beginning, some people don't have it. So since you were talking about the Psalms, I just wanted to raise that real quick. Another thing I wanted to point out that you mentioned Christian Mingle. I never signed up. I signed up for a lot of dating sites, but I never signed up for Christian Mingle. And do you know why? I didn't want to be disappointed with a Christian. I mean, I just felt like it could go wrong. Like, okay,
Your level of self-protection.
I mean,
That's
okay,
another.
I joined Match, I joined like all the things, but I never wanted to join Christian Mingle because if I met a knucklehead on there, it would hurt so much worse.
Listen, it was the worst. I have a book that hasn't been published yet. Maybe the Lord will bless it. It's called Christian Mingle Gave Me Night Terrors, Finding
Okay.
Grace and Sanity When Dating Gets Real. It was horrific beyond all imaginations, Yvette. So you
Yep.
had some discernment going on.
Yes.
And for no reason, you're just like crushing. And then it would be like, is that an angel? They would like use scripture. It was so terrible. And
Yes.
then inappropriate.
Yes.
To another podcast.
Yes, that's another whole thing. We need to talk about dating because that's a whole nother thing.
Oh yeah.
Yes. No, you'll have to come back on the show for sure. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, you've talked a couple times about finding a therapist. There are some Christians who feel like, well, I've got my priest and I can go to God. So what do I need this for? Can you talk about why that was important to you in your life and why it might be a good thing for people?
Yeah. So I used to be one of those Christians. I think when I was early Christian, I've been saved for about 23 years. I used to be judgy about people that went to therapy. I really was like, well, Jesus is enough and he's your story now. And his blood covers all. Stop looking back in your story and just he redeems everything. And I slowly have learned I don't think that's true. I feel like, of course, Jesus saves you. And of course, lifelong sanctification is a lifelong journey and we're always working through issues. But I really feel like there is something to be said to going back into your story with a professional and really examining what happened to you in your life and how you've been processing it or not processing at all. And they're able to point out patterns because I feel like you could be the strongest Christian in the world, walking with the Holy Spirit, speaking in tongues. But if you have unhealed trauma that you aren't even aware of or you haven't addressed, unfortunately, in my life, and I've seen it in so many others, it will come out. It will rear its ugly head, whether that's your vices or things that you're clinging to or you can't get freedom in. I feel really strongly about it because I've just gone through an anxious, an attachment modality of therapy where they really look, you're either securely attached, anxiously attached, disordered attachment, or avoidantly attached if you didn't attach appropriately to your caregivers. And I used to think, well, nothing insane happened to me. I think a lot of us are like, well, this and this happened, but nothing like I was fine. I had an okay childhood. And I just, through the years, I'm like, yeah, most of us have some type of trauma. And I feel like God wants us to be healed. Like God wants us to have an abundant life. It doesn't mean that his power and his strength and his goodness aren't enough. I feel like he's given us a world where there is therapy. And I feel so strongly about it because the pendulum has swung in such a different direction of now I'm evangelical about it. Now I'm that friend that almost like diagnoses everyone. Like they'll be talking about a boy. I'm like, yeah, anxious. He's anxious. So yeah.
And can we talk about testimony comparison for a little bit? Like, oh, yes. Hers is so much more important. Oh, he didn't beat me, or, I don't really have much of a testimony. We all have testimonies and we all have trauma. I will say that I have had gone to a therapist a couple of times, one, they were both kind of within the marriage because, I wasn't happy. And I will say that I've had Christian therapists and then kind of neutral therapists. And for me, I did find that I preferred Christian therapists because one in particular just flat out told me that I was unequally yoked and just flat out told me that. And I looked back and the marriage and then even after the marriage, why was I dating people who didn't share my faith? Why was I dating agnostics? I dated an atheist. Me. Like, what was that about, right?
That's in the friend chat and you're like, your friends and family, like, oh,
no one said anything, right? So
you were a missionary dater. I've been guilty. Missionary
Yeah.
dating is what they call it. You're like, oh, he'll come around, right? We'll watch some YouTube sermons. Look at my Bible for Christmas. Yeah, I hear you.
So I will say that, yeah, I mean, and if I would say therapy, give it a try. I would definitely say give it a try. If you are more comfortable with the Christian therapist, they exist. Check that out. But you certainly need to find one, I believe, that you are comfortable with, who you feel like speaks your language, that you can understand and that can help you break some things down. So I think it just kind of depends. But for me, I did have a good experience with a Christian therapist.
Yeah, and it runs the gamut. I have to chime in because I wrote a blog called Looking for a Therapist is a new match.com because it was really hard for me. I had to go through a lot. And
Hmm.
I was the kind of person that said I would never not see a Christian therapist because just the lens that they look through life, just what they prioritize. Me and my ex-husband went to a secular therapist once years and years ago, and I'll never forget. He was a single like 23-year-old. He's like, "Well, why wouldn't you get a divorce?" I'll just never forget it. I'm like, or like, did you fill out the same thing I did in my questionnaire? Like, I want to be married. So
Uh,
I would always say, like, only, but then I feel like in the Christian world of counseling and therapy, I do think there's sometimes not an, how do I say this without, I appreciate people that volunteer their time. And anytime someone's willing to give therapy or counseling to someone else out of the goodness of their heart is wonderful. But I do think when you're really looking for, to solve issues and to go deeper, I think you need a credentialed therapist. Like now I need a lot of like acronyms after after the name. I want an actual psychologist.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no.
So,
Trust me. I don't mean no. All that, all
but
that.
I'm saying
But
in
who
the
happens
Christian
to be
world,
Christian? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yes, I
yeah. They
feel
know
like, and
they.
that's so hard to find though.
Yeah.
I felt like it was one of the most challenging things I've gone through because it's so disheartening and exhausting to go from therapist to therapist, pouring your heart out, just feeling hopeful and like, okay, now I just have to like really go for a psychologist. But I think it's difficult.
Yeah, no, it can be trying because, yeah, for a lot of different reasons. So your mom, you have kids. Let's talk about let's talk about that kind of post divorce with kids, and we can talk about it through the lens of dating, or just even being able to talk to them about like what's happening in life, because you just said you didn't want to divorce the second person because you felt like you were harming them or something. So once you made that decision and it happened, how are family dynamics after divorce? I guess that's a question.
So for the first divorce, it's I think it's always more difficult when you have a biological child with someone. So my first divorce, we had two kids. They were 4 and 5 when we split up, and it was almost easier because they were so young and we were
Hmm.
very amicable. Thank God. We still even did holidays together. Like so fortunate for that. So it was almost easier in that way because they just didn't really, lucky enough, I haven't seen any issues. I felt like we handled it well, no custody battles or anything like that. So God was like, I felt like blessed us so much for even though it was an unpleasant situation. The second divorce was a blended family. So we had 5 kids. It's easier in the way that, okay, we're not losing time now with a biological parent. And I feel like they bond, I think, less easy as they were older because my youngest is 15, then I have a 17-year-old, a 24-year-old, all boys that live from home. And I just feel like it was easier this time around in the sense that I could be transparent with them. And I honestly, every time I sat down and talked to them, because it was a process, you can't just, I was like, we're having difficulty. We're talking about the possibility. I really wanted to be transparent with them and I wanted them to see my faith at work as much as humanly possible. I didn't want it to seem like I was a victim and my life was falling apart and I'm just like hanging on to my faith with a big toe. I tried to just be like, I feel like God is going to take care of us. I trust that like whatever new house we find, it'll be just the one for us. And so I feel like it was such a different, when you leave a blended family than a biological, like a nuclear family, it's such a different experience. And it was less emotional and less difficult the second time. And I could go on and on about how wonderful it's been. Of course, it's painful when you get a divorce, but just how God has been faithful and come through in such surprising ways where my kids bonded in a way that they wouldn't and weren't when we were in a blended family. And all the biggest fears that I have had that kept me from agreeing to the divorce and kept me like, no, we're just going to stay in this till the kids graduate high school, have flip flopped. I could go on and on, but just like a couple things that I'm like, oh no. And it's like, no, that never even came true. And actually, something better even has formed. which
Mm.
is so God. So I never want to like throw and be careful when you're talking about past relationships. I never want to throw anyone under the bus. So I never want to expand in such detail, but it's been honestly wild about how good it's been, even in the midst of pain.
Wow. Do you have any girls?
No girls.
Okay.
So
Okay, that's
yeah,
interesting, yeah.
lots
Well,
of nieces.
so and I was gonna ask you if you had girls, were there lessons that you were hoping to impart to them during
Mm,
this time? But let's talk about your boys. I mean, you obviously want to raise good boys who are going to be good husbands. So let's
mhm.
talk about it from that lens. Were there lessons that you were trying to impart to your boys?
Yeah. Well, I wanted them, I think we all want to give our kids a good example of what a marriage should be and then a good example of what a wife should be and a husband should be.
Mhm.
So, one of in that vein, when you're in an unhappy marriage, as any divorced person knows, it takes a lot of life out of you. It takes a lot of energy out of you. I feel like all my prayer and everything was going into holding the relationship together. And I kind of felt like a shell of a woman. So, what gave me a little freedom after both divorces really is like, do I want them to see an unhappy, unaffectionate, toxic marriage? Do I want them to believe that you should just let someone do whatever they want and walk all over you and just, like there'll be better things in heaven? Like I don't really believe that. I know there's a lot of I know divorce is a polarizing issue in Christian circles, but I've deeply researched it and I've wrote about divorce for other sites for like crosswalk Bible believing sites because I feel like I put a lot of research and thought and prayer into my beliefs. So anyways, I feel like that was one of them. I wanted them to see a happy, joyful mom who wasn't suffering. And the other thing is I wanted them to see how to be a good husband in marriage. And without throwing anyone under the bus, I just felt like this is not what I want for them. Would I want them to stay if they were in a marriage like this?
Yeah.
Or is it just my guilt and fear keeping me in?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
There was so the New York Times used to, and maybe they still do, have a column called, and I'm gonna get it wrong. It's either called Modern Love. I think it's called Modern
Modern love.
Love.
It became a
Yeah.
show. It was actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I didn't read every single episode, but when I was, and I'm trying to remember, was I divorced? I'm not sure, but I remember reading this one about a woman whose husband said, "I'm going to leave." And she said, "Well, that's fine. You can leave, but I'm not going to grant you a divorce. So you can just go do what you wanted." So he left and went off and did whatever he wanted to do. Sometimes he would come home and she would always welcome him home. And in the end, she kind of wore him down. I don't know, but in the end, he realized, no, actually, this I do want this marriage, and they kept the marriage. So I didn't have that experience personally, and I never felt like I could understand it. Now, I always say at least once on this show, this is not an anti-marriage show. And I do
Yeah.
believe in marriage. I am remarried. We've been married for 8 years and through the Lord's blessing 100%. So I can't say. But I also believe that the Lord is not blaming me for a divorce. I don't think he's condemning me or damning me for a divorce. But when I remember reading that, I was like, okay, she believed in her marriage, but her husband was not respecting her. He wasn't loving her. I mean, I couldn't understand when I read that, other than the fact that she believed in her vows so strongly that she would not let them go. And I just didn't know if I could be that woman.
Mm,
And clearly, it's been like 10 years since I read that. Clearly, it has stuck with me. And I still find it very curious. And I'm just wondering, what is that?
yeah.
How does that
Well,
make to you?
we were raised, I mean, I was raised, I think I'm a little older than you, but I was raised, and a lot of the literature I read was you never leave. Your job is to be, once you took a marriage vow, it was not about your husband. You made a
Hmm.
commitment with the Lord. So no matter what, even in the context of like inappropriate sexual things, like if the husband cheats, you would
Yeah.
forgive him. And if he's going to stay, then it's your job to stay. If he's completely emotionally avoidant and doesn't meet your needs emotionally, you still have to stay. That's what I was taught and what the Bible, the church I was raised in, kind of that was the narrative. And I don't agree with any of that anymore. I feel like you have to have a willing spirit. And I don't think it's universal. So that story that you read, God could have told her that, right? Like, God,
Yeah.
that's fine, but I don't think you should apply. I don't think these concepts are just black and white, universally applicable. Because I feel like you have to have a willing spirit. Like, I had friends that just divorced after 20 years, and the husband was like, I will not give you a divorce. I will not give you a divorce. But he had not given her affection or attention, wouldn't take her on a date, no family vacations, wouldn't talk to her. So he divorced her. He left the marriage a long time ago. But a
Yes.
black and white person would be like, oh, well, he's such a good Christian. He wouldn't sign the papers. Give me a
Yeah.
break. But that's what we grew up in. So I've evolved, and the more I'm like, oh, the older you get, the more wisdom you have. I'm like, okay, that's not what God. That doesn't honor God. That doesn't glorify God to the world. If marriage is supposed to be a representative of Christ's love for the church, no one wants that. So I just feel like it's also a blend of what we were raised to believe, I think.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Thank you for that perspective and that insight. Okay, let's talk about your book. So you've got a book, Hiding from the Kids in the Prayer Closet. I think that you may be working on another one. So talk a little bit about your writing and what's next for you.
So I have another book called The Christian Girl's Guide to Life After Divorce. Hasn't been published yet. I'm hoping, I'm praying God will bless it. I feel like it's funny. I wrote that book a year ago when I was married, and I
Mhm.
wrote it with a understanding of everything I had been through up until that point, and I wanted it to be like, oh, she's remarried now, and look at like God's faithfulness. And then I
Yeah.
went through this. So I have a literary agent. It was kind of like, okay, why don't we get through this next journey? And honestly, what I'm hoping, and I'm very half glass full, I'm a very like idealistic, like I think God put that project on hold because I feel like he knew, God knows everything. I feel like days are numbered. So he
Mhm.
knows the last day will take a breath. So he knew when I was writing that book from the standpoint of a happily married woman, happily married, that I would get another divorce and learn so much more, like what I just described when we first started talking, right? The intimacy with Jesus that I never had.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that, okay, I'll go through this more. I'm still in my first year of divorce. And now I'll even have more to say and more to give because I feel like this space in the Christian publishing world is vapid and just devoid of the things that I'm talking about because
Mhm.
there's a lot of like heal your heart, cry to Jesus, but this is like, well, how do you avoid not having sex? How do you avoid not masturbating? Like hard things, right?
Yeah.
How do you avoid that I just want to talk about because I feel like people need it. And so I'm really hoping that's to come. Then I have another book called Pretty Holy Devotions for the Slightly Unhinged because it's my brand. We'll
Nice.
see.
Wow. Jessica, thank you so much. This has been really a really great conversation. I really enjoyed talking with you. I'm so happy you're in this space, and I am happy that this space is growing. So the Positively Joy podcast has been around for 4 years, but the Lord been kind of tapping on my shoulder saying you need to talk about divorce. So we just pivoted in November. So I feel like we're still relatively new to this space. But I'm so happy to see, and I'm happy that we discovered you. Please come back to the show. We'll have to talk about dating. That'll be good.
I will. Can't wait. Thanks for having me.
Thank you
Take care.
so much.
See ya.